So, introducing theme 2, people and processes, organizing OFE while avoiding the technology fallacy. So just to start again, what is OFE? It's a process to combine the knowledge of farmers and other experts to create valuable insights. It follows a number of principles. The first one is that OFE is farmer-centric. Farmers fuel the research process. It must be directly relevant to farm managers. A second principle is that OFE is conducted in real systems, on the farm, with the farmer's own management and at scales that are meaningful to the farmer. So it must be also practical and adaptable. Third principle, OFE is evidence-driven. Insights are encoded in data that can be very large databases acquired with digital technologies or perhaps more humble qualitative assessments. OFE is specialist-enabled, meaning that other experts than the farmers add value to the process across agricultural, social, and data sciences. OFE emphasizes co-learning by engaging people across various communities of practice and industry, government, and other sectors. The key is to bridge the different interests of those stakeholders. And finally, OFE endeavors to be scalable by socializing mechanisms, through a number of socializing mechanisms, but also through a number of changes. Now I will develop a little bit because this is critical for the conference themes. When we talk about being scalable, people tend to think about scaling out, which means doing the same thing, replicating or expanding activities to other areas, sometimes with a bit of adaptation to fit different circumstances. But to scale out well, we also need to scale up. In other words, having institutional support, and that usually requires changes so that then can be suitable and essentially effective. And for this, we also need scaling deep. We need often to change cultures, how people think and what matters to them, so that they can develop institutional support and replicate and expand activities well. This is key for any social innovation, and OFE is one. So OFE is a process. It's also a global movement. OFE is happening because there is a demand worldwide to mainstream farmers' inputs through the co-creation of knowledge. And OFE is a research field with two objects of studies. The first is doing OFE to develop agronomic insights. Essentially, what is the topic of the OFE? What do the farmer and the other stakeholders want to know better? And the second object of study is how to do OFE better. And that defines what we call the OFE sciences, which are all those required to achieve this. Now, the reality is that we already know a lot. So we need to connect communities to share, gather, and align what we already know so we can make progress without reinventing the wheel. Now, centering a bit more on our topic, which is how to organize OFE. OFE does take different shapes and forms. It can be more farmer-led or more scientist-led. Ideally, it is farmer-centric. And those familiar with action research and participatory research will be familiar with the iterative process that goes through engaging the stakeholders, acquiring data after co-designing the experiments, everything required to conduct analysis, and then a feedback to promote discussion toward meaningful interpretation. And of course, this has to be repeated because we are in the progressive building of knowledge. Mechanisms for scaling also have to be part of this. Now, the OFE process is motivated by what we can call the endogenous creation of knowledge that is relevant locally. It is also very often motivated by digital technologies, which add value at some key parts of the process, such as data management, analysis, and scaling. And you will hear more about this in the third webinar next Monday. But digital technologies also add value in what we could call the more human part of the process. They can help entice people to be involved in the OFE by providing new information or new data that they weren't aware of. They can help connect the last mile, which is critical to reach farmers across the world, including marginal groups. Digital technologies are key to visualize the information, and there are multiple ways of doing this. And finally, they also can help with scaling other than simply integrating information. The question, though, is that it's not really sure how we should do all of this. How do we integrate digital technologies within the OFE process? Some parts are evidence, the information, the visualization, the added value of the information, all of that is clear. But how do we do things well? How do we organize OFE well? What we are starting to understand, though, is that there's one thing that starts to come up, and it's expressed through people who start saying, it starts with a process, not the technology. Beware being dazzled by digital hopes. So there's a bit of a common theme about be careful to forget the human aspects. And recently, from MIT, a team of researchers has produced quite a large body of work that they've called the technology fallacy. So there are research articles, books, videos. There's probably going to be a movie because those people are very charismatic and organized. And the point that they are making is that people are the real key to digital transformation. And they concluded this after conducting hundreds of surveys with businesses across the world. Essentially, how do they become digitally mature, and how do they use digital technologies to promote innovation? And there has been a sequel already, where the authors, Keynes and colleagues, have developed a number of principles to explain, well, how do you put people at the center of digital transformation? And what they concluded is that it's about agile teams, ecosystems, and ethics. So here are the principles, a little bit modified, but adapted lightly. Agile teams means giving latitude and agility to people, to employees, to the people who are part of the process. It also means favoring loose couplings. So we need to go away from rigid hierarchies and trying to work together in a more less rigid way. The second pillar is ecosystems. Within the team, developing the skills of people that can go across multiple elements that are required to be functional. And also outside the team, the people who are successful gain access to greater knowledge network and skills through external partners. Finally, ethics. Agile processes, it's a great idea, but the more agile, the sturdier the guardrails necessary so that it can support messy processes. It's also important to make goals explicit. People need to know where they are going. They need to have a vision, and then things can be modified as we go. They don't hinder agile processes, but people need to know where they're going. So during the last couple of months, I've been asking 30 R&D experts from across the world to comment on OFE and their relevant experiences. And what is really interesting is that the vast majority of their comments fits within the principles of Keynes and colleagues. So for instance, joint exploration is the key to marry perspectives and to progress through the OFE process. It's important to learn, not to prescribe. We have to be nimble to avoid wastages. OFE is different because it allows building productive relationships and changing, enduring hierarchies between farmers and scientists. Also, if we want to work toward farmers' needs as a way to be useful to everybody in the agri-food system, well, we need to identify those needs first. Ecosystems. People have mentioned how innovation ecosystem platforms are key tools to bridge sectors and work around translation issues. Community-based approach. The importance of the mediator role in actively managing the interface between all those different stakeholders. The importance of co-developing tools and testing them with users, what is called UX sciences, and that lots of people across the world are very interested in, but that we barely ever hear about in agriculture. As for ethics, people have mentioned as well the unintended consequences of digital tools. Data ownership is key. so is the danger of exploiting farmers' innovation and data in the name of science. And this is where the alignment of interest has to happen, and it has to be recognized that people do have different interests. Rule of engagement, getting from the start. We will hear more about this. Inclusion. Digital technologies are not only for the best and largest, they also can reach marginal groups.